The smooth, expensive hum of an engine worth more than his entire garage rolled to a stop outside Eli Morrison's shop on a Tuesday morning that felt like every other Tuesday in Riverside, Ohio, hot, dusty, and forgotten by anyone who'd ever made it out. The black SUV sat there idling for a full minute before the door opened, and Eli didn't look up from the transmission he was rebuilding because in 15 years of fixing broken-down Chevys and Fords with 200,000 miles on them, he'd learned that expensive cars didn't come to his neighborhood unless they were lost. The engine cut off. A car door opened with that solid, weighted thunk that only German engineering made. Eli's hands kept moving, grease under every fingernail, the wrench turning in the rhythm he'd known since he was 16 and his father had shown him how an engine breathed. Then he heard it, the soft mechanical whir of a lift, the quiet hiss of hydraulics, and the gentle thud of a wheelchair ramp meeting cracked asphalt. His hands stopped. The wrench stayed suspended in the air for just a second too long, and when he finally looked up he saw her. A little black girl about 10 years old, sat perfectly still in a wheelchair that gleamed like it cost more than his entire year's rent, and heavy metal leg braces caught the morning sun and threw it back in sharp, unforgiving angles. She wasn't crying. She wasn't smiling. She was just watching him with eyes too careful for a child, eyes that had learned to measure adults before they spoke, before they smiled, before they decided whether she was worth their time. Behind her, a woman stepped out of the driver's seat, tall, elegant, wearing sunglasses that probably cost what Eli made in a month, and carrying herself with the kind of exhausted grace that came from holding everything together when everything wanted to fall apart. She didn't look at Eli. She looked at the garage, at the peeling paint and the oil stains that had been there since before Eli bought the place, at the hand-painted sign that said Morrison's Auto Repair, in letters that were fading like everything else in this part of town. The woman's jaw tightened. She looked back at her phone, then at the GPS screen still glowing in her car, then back at Eli's garage like she was calculating how many wrong turns had led her here. The girl in the wheelchair kept watching Eli's hands. Not his face. His hands. Like she'd learned that hands told you more than faces ever could. Eli set the wrench down slowly, wiped his palms on a rag that was more grease than cloth, and walked toward them with the careful, measured steps of a man who knew that sudden movements scared people who'd been hurt. "Help you folks?" he said, and his voice came out rougher than he'd intended, scraped raw by years of talking to engines instead of people. The woman pulled her sunglasses up, and Eli saw exhaustion carved into every line of her face. Not the exhaustion of a single sleepless night, but the kind that lived in your bones after years of fighting battles that nobody else could see. "My car," she said, and her voice had that clipped, efficient tone of someone used to giving instructions and having them followed. "It's making a sound. A clicking sound. From the front left." Eli nodded and walked to the SUV, still warm from the highway, and popped the hood with the kind of automatic competence that came from having opened 10,000 hoods in 10,000 parking lots. The engine was pristine, dealer-maintained, probably serviced every 3,000 miles exactly, the kind of engine that had never missed an oil change or blown a gasket. He leaned in listening and heard the click she meant, faint, irregular, the kind of sound that most people wouldn't even notice but that would drive someone crazy once they did. A loose heat shield probably. 10-minute fix. Maybe 20 if the bolt was stripped. "I can take a look," Eli said, straightening up. "Probably just needs a tightening. Won't take long." The woman looked at her watch, expensive gold, the kind that didn't just tell time but announced that you had enough money not to care about it. "How long is not long?" she asked. 20 minutes. Maybe 30. She looked back at her daughter and something passed between them, some silent conversation that Eli recognized because he'd had a daughter once, and he knew what it looked like when a mother asked a question without words and a child answered without speaking. The girl's eyes flicked to the garage, to the single chair Eli kept for customers, to the concrete floor stained with decades of oil and coolant. She gave the smallest nod. "Fine," the woman said. "We'll wait." She started to turn the wheelchair, but the girl's hand moved on the control stick, and the chair rolled forward on its own, electric motors humming softly, navigating the cracked pavement with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing this for years. The woman followed, her heels clicking against concrete, and Eli noticed that she checked the street behind them before she entered the garage, like she was making sure nobody had followed them, like she expected someone might. Eli pulled the SUV into the garage bay, turned on the overhead light that flickered twice before staying on, and got his tools. The girl positioned his wheelchair near the workbench, not too close but not far, in a spot where she could see everything Eli did. Her mother stood behind her, one hand resting on the wheelchair's handle, and pulled out her phone. She typed something, deleted it, typed again, and never sent it. 3 minutes passed. Eli worked in silence, the familiar rhythm of wrench on bolt, the satisfaction of fixing something broken. The heat shield was loose, just like he'd thought, and the bolt had vibrated free over miles of highway driving. He replaced it with a new one from his parts bin, tightened it down, and tested the engine. The clicking was gone. The whole time he felt the girl watching. Not casual watching, studying. Like she was memorizing the way his hands moved, the sequence of actions, the logic of repair. When he caught her eye, she didn't look away like most kids did. She held his gaze with that same careful measuring, and Eli felt something twist in his chest because he'd seen that look before. His daughter Sarah had looked at the world that way before the accident, before the hospital, before everything ended. "You like cars?" Eli asked, and his voice came out gentler than he'd meant it to. The girl's eyes shifted to her mother, seeking permission. The woman looked up from her phone, and for a second, something sharp flashed across her face. Protective, territorial. The instinct of someone who'd learned that strangers couldn't be trusted with her daughter. But then she nodded just slightly. "Sometimes," the girl said, and her voice was quiet but clear, not shy, just economical with words. "What's your name?" Eli asked. Another glance at her mother. Another microscopic nod. "Sky," the girl said. "With an E." "Sky," Eli repeated. "That's a good name. Strong name." Sky's eyes narrowed slightly, like she was testing his words for condescension, for the sing-song tone that adults used when they talked to disabled kids like they were half their age. Eli kept his voice level, adult to adult, and after a moment Sky's expression relaxed. "What's yours?" she asked. "Eli." No extra letters, just Eli. The corner of Sky's mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close. Her mother's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her whole body tensed. She answered without saying hello. "I know," she said into the phone, her voice dropping low and tight. "I'm handling it. I don't care what Marcus thinks. I don't care what the board thinks. She needed time away and I took it. We'll be back tonight." She listened and her jaw clenched. "Tell them I said to wait." She ended the call and stood there for a moment, staring at the phone like it had personally betrayed her. When she looked up, she saw Eli watching, and her expression shuttered closed. "Is it fixed?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Eli said. Heat shield came loose. Bolt vibrated free. "Replaced it. Should be good now." She nodded and pulled out a wallet. Black leather, monogrammed with initials Eli couldn't quite see. "How much?" $40, Eli said. She pulled out a $100 bill without even looking at the denominations. "Keep the change." Eli hesitated. $60 was $60, but something about the way she said it made it feel like charity, like she was tipping the help, and Eli had never liked being anyone's good deed. "40's fine," he said. "I don't need change for a 10-minute job." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly, and she looked at him like she was recalculating something. Then she put the 100 back and pulled out 2 20s instead, handing them to Eli without a word. Their fingers didn't touch. Sky was still watching Eli's hands. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. Her mother's head snapped toward her. "Sky." "It's okay," Eli said. "What do you want to know?" Sky's fingers moved on her wheelchair's armrest, drumming a silent pattern. "When you fix an engine," she said slowly, "can you always tell what's wrong? Or do you sometimes have to guess?" It was such an odd question, so specific and searching, that Eli paused before answering. He thought about the transmission he'd been rebuilding when they arrived, the one he'd torn apart 3 times trying to find the problem. He thought about the mysteries that engines sometimes held, the way something could be broken in a way that didn't make sense until you looked at it from a different angle. "Sometimes I can tell right away," Eli said honestly. "Sometimes I have to guess. And sometimes—" He paused, wondering why he was telling this child something he'd never quite put into words. "Sometimes the thing that's broken isn't the thing that looks broken. Sometimes you have to look at the whole system, see how all the parts work together, before you can figure out where the real problem is." Sky nodded slowly, Like he just confirmed something she'd suspected. Her mother's hand tightened on the wheelchair handle. "We should go," the woman said. But Sky wasn't done. "What if everyone keeps looking at the wrong part?" she asked. "What if they keep trying to fix the same thing over and over? But it's not really what's broken." The garage got very quiet. Outside, a car drove by, its radio-thumping bass that rattled the windows. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed. Eli looked at this 10-year-old girl in her $40,000 wheelchair with her careful eyes and her two adult questions, and he felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years, the feeling that he was being trusted with something that mattered. "Then you need someone willing to look somewhere else," Eli said quietly. "Someone who doesn't already think they know the answer." Sky's eyes locked with his, and for 3 seconds that stretched out like hours, neither of them looked away. Then her mother stepped forward, breaking the moment like snapping a wire. "Thank you for your help," she said, her voice formal and final. She turned the wheelchair manually, taking control from Sky, and started toward the SUV. Sky twisted in her seat to look back at Eli. "What if the person who knows the answer isn't a doctor?" she asked, and her voice carried across the garage with perfect clarity. Her mother stopped walking. "Sky, that's enough. What if it's someone like you?" Sky finished. The woman's shoulders went rigid. She didn't turn around. "Get in the car, baby," she said, and there was something in her voice now, not anger but fear, the kind of fear that came from hope being dangerous. Eli stood there with $40 in his hand and grease on his jeans, and he wanted to say something, anything, but he didn't know what he could possibly offer these people with their expensive car and their expensive problems. So he said nothing. The woman loaded Sky into the SUV with practiced efficiency, folded the wheelchair, stored it in the back, made sure the seatbelt was secure. She started the engine and the clicking sound was gone, replaced by the smooth, expensive hum that engines made when they were working exactly as designed. The SUV pulled out of the garage and Eli watched it go, and he thought that would be the end of it. That was Tuesday. On Wednesday, the SUV came back. This time, Sky was alone in the back seat, and the woman didn't get out right away. She sat in the driver's seat for a full 5 minutes, engine running, and Eli could see her through the windshield having an argument with herself. Finally, she got out. She walked into the garage like she was walking into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided against her. "I need to ask you something," she said. "No preamble. No greeting. And I need you to be honest with me, because I've heard enough lies from enough people to last 10 lifetimes." Eli set down the carburetor he was cleaning. "Okay." She took a breath. "Yesterday, you said sometimes the thing that's broken isn't the thing that looks broken. You said sometimes you have to look at the whole system." She paused. "Were you talking about cars? Or were you talking about my daughter?" Eli had learned in 7 years of grief and silence that truth was usually the hardest thing and the only thing worth saying. "Both," he said. The woman's eyes closed for just a second. When they opened, they were full of something that looked like drowning. "They told me she'd never walk again," she said, and her voice was steady but her hands were shaking. 17 doctors. Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, neurologists, orthopedic surgeons, physical therapists, 17 different experts, and they all said the same thing. Permanent paralysis from the waist down. Nerve damage from the accident. Irreversible. Adaptive equipment. Lifetime of accommodation. Learn to accept it. She stopped and looked back at the SUV where Sky was watching through the window. "But sometimes," her voice cracked. She pressed her lips together, fighting for control. "Sometimes when no one's watching, when she thinks I'm asleep or in another room, I see her toes move. Just barely. Just the smallest movement. And every time I mention it to her doctors, they tell me it's involuntary muscle spasms. Reflex activity. Not real movement. They tell me I'm seeing what I want to see. That I'm in denial. That I need to accept reality." She looked at Eli and her eyes were desperate. "So I'm asking you, someone who fixes things that everyone else says are broken beyond repair. Am I crazy? Am I seeing things that aren't there? Or is it possible that 17 doctors are wrong?" The garage was silent except for the drip of a slow coolant leak from a truck in the far bay. Eli thought about his daughter Sarah, about the doctors who told him there was no hope, about the way hope could be the most painful thing you could carry. He thought about engines that everyone said were seized but that sometimes, with the right touch and enough patience, could turn over one more time. I don't know, Eli said, and the woman's face started to collapse. But I know that doctors are human and humans miss things. I know that the body is more complicated than any engine I've ever seen. And I know, he paused, choosing his words carefully, that mothers usually know their children better than any expert ever will. The woman's hand came up to her mouth, and she bit down on her knuckle hard enough to leave marks. She asked to come back here, she whispered. Last night she asked if we could come back and see the mechanic who looked at her like she was a person instead of a problem. Those were her exact words. He looked at me like I was a person. Something sharp twisted in Eli's chest. What's your name? He asked. Victoria, she said. Victoria Hart. The name landed between them with weight, and Eli saw the exact moment Victoria realized he might recognize it. Victoria Hart, CEO of Hart Technologies. Her face had been on the cover of Forbes last year. She was one of the richest women in America, a tech genius who'd built an empire, a black woman who'd shattered every ceiling in her industry, and she was standing in his garage, asking him to believe in her daughter's twitching toes. I don't care about your money, Eli said quietly, and I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose anything or treat anything or promise you anything. I'm not asking you to, Victoria said. I'm asking you to look. Just look. With fresh eyes. Without preconceptions. The way you'd look at an engine that everyone said was dead. Eli looked past her to the SUV, where Sky sat in the back seat still watching. The girl raised one hand in a small wave. Her fingers moved clearly, deliberately. Not a spasm. A choice. What happened to her? Eli asked. Victoria's face went carefully blank. Car accident. 3 years ago. She was 7. Drunk driver ran a red light, T-boned us on her side. I walked away with a concussion. The sentence didn't finish. Didn't need to. And the movement you're seeing? Eli asked. When did that start? 6 months ago, Victoria said. But it's gotten more frequent. More deliberate. Last week I saw her flex her foot. Actually flex it. Pull her toes toward her shin. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it was real. I know it was real. She stopped and looked at Eli with something that was almost anger. Do you know what it's like to see hope in your child's eyes and have to pretend you don't see it, because every expert you trust tells you you're wrong? Do you know what it's like to be called delusional for believing your own daughter? Eli did know. He knew exactly what that was like. Bring her in, he said. Victoria's breath caught. What? Bring her into the garage. Let me look. You're a mechanic. I'm a mechanic who knows that sometimes the thing everyone's looking at isn't the thing that matters. Victoria stood there for a long moment, and Eli could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the weighing of risk and hope, of desperation and dignity, of what she had to lose versus what she'd already lost. Then she turned and walked back to the SUV. When Sky came into the garage this time, she rolled herself in without help, her hands sure on the controls. She positioned herself in the same spot as yesterday, near the workbench where she could see everything. Victoria stood behind her again, that same protective hand on the wheelchair's handle. Sky, Eli said, crouching down so he was at her eye level. Your mom says you've been feeling things in your legs. Movement. Is that true? Sky's eyes flicked to her mother, and something complicated passed across her face. Fear, hope, uncertainty. If I say yes, Sky said slowly, what happens? It was such a careful question, full of experience with disappointment. Nothing happens, Eli said. I'm not a doctor. I can't run tests or prescribe anything. I just want to know what you feel. But if I say yes and Mom gets her hopes up and then the doctors say I'm wrong. Sky's voice was thin now, stretched tight with the weight of protecting her mother from more disappointment. Victoria made a sound like something was tearing. Baby, she whispered. Sky turned her head to look up at her mother. I don't want to hurt you again. You have never hurt me, Victoria said, and her voice broke on the last word. Not once. Not ever. When I told Dr. Williams the first felt tingling, and he said it was phantom sensation, you cried in the car, Sky said. I saw you. Victoria's hand covered her mouth again. Eli stood up, giving them space, but Sky reached out and grabbed his wrist. Her grip was strong. Real. I can feel, Sky said, looking at Eli now instead of her mother. Not all the time. Not everywhere. But sometimes. And it's getting stronger. She paused. Will you tell me if you think I'm making it up? Will you tell me the truth? Yes, Eli said. Can you move your toes right now? Sky bit her lip. Maybe. I'm not sure. It's hard when people are watching. It's like trying to remember a dream. The harder I try, the more it slips away. Close your eyes, Eli said. Sky did. Eli pulled over his rolling mechanic stool and sat down near Sky's feet. Victoria started to speak, then stopped. Eli looked at her and she nodded. Her face was pale. Don't think about moving, Eli said softly. Just think about what your feet feel like. Is there pressure? Temperature? Anything. Sky's face scrunched in concentration. 30 seconds passed. Nothing. Victoria's shoulders started to slump. Then Sky's big toe moved. Just the smallest twitch, barely visible, but Eli was watching for it and he saw it. Victoria gasped. Did you? Sure, Eli said, not looking away from Sky's foot. Again, Sky. Whatever you just did. Do it again. Sky's face was still scrunched. Another few seconds passed. The same toe moved again, and this time the one next to it moved too. I can see it, Eli said quietly. Both of you. Keep going. This time all 5 toes on her right foot moved. Victoria made a sound like a sob and a laugh combined. Sky's eyes opened. Did I do it? Really? Yes, Eli said. Really? The doctor said. Sky began. The doctors aren't here, Eli said. And sometimes what looks impossible is just improbable. Improbable things happen every day. He looked up at Victoria. How much physical therapy has she had? 2 years, Victoria said, her voice shaking. 5 days a week. Every exercise they gave us. Every recommendation. She worked harder than any adult I've ever seen. Then 6 months ago they said we'd reached maximum medical improvement. They said continuing therapy was just false hope. And you stopped. No, Sky said. Mom hired someone to come to the house 3 times a week anyway. She just didn't tell the insurance company or the doctors. Victoria's face colored. I couldn't let her give up. Eli stood and walked to his workbench. He pulled out his phone and opened Google, typed for a minute, scrolled and then set the phone down. I'm going to tell you something, he said. And it's going to sound crazy. But I had a daughter once. And before she died, she had a different kind of paralysis. Not from an accident, but from a neurological condition the doctors couldn't fully explain. And in the middle of researching everything I could, trying to find something, anything that might help, I found articles about nerve regeneration. About cases where people recovered function years after they were told they never would. He paused. The research said that young people, especially kids, had more capacity for neuroplasticity than doctors used to think. That sometimes if the spinal cord wasn't completely severed, if there were any intact pathways at all, the body could find new routes around damage. Slowly. Inconsistently. But possible. Victoria's hands were shaking. Why wouldn't her doctors know this? Maybe they do, Eli said. Maybe they don't want to give false hope. Maybe they're following standard protocols. Maybe they saw the MRI results and made a call based on what usually happens. But Sky isn't usual. He looked at Sky. Are you? Sky shook her head. I'm going to ask you to do something, Eli said. And you can say no. But if you're willing, come back tomorrow. And for 1 week I want to spend 1 hour a day with you. Not therapy. Not exercises. Just exploration. Seeing what you can feel. What you can move. No pressure. No expectations. No doctors watching. Just us trying to figure out what your body can do. Why? Victoria asked. Why would you do this? Eli met her eyes. Because my daughter died and I couldn't save her. Because I know what it's like to be told there's no hope. And because when I look at Sky, I see someone who's been underestimated for so long that she started to underestimate herself. He turned back to Sky. And because when you asked me yesterday if the person who knows the answer might not be a doctor, you weren't really asking me. You were testing to see if I believe you. And I do. Sky's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Okay, she said. 1 week. Victoria looked at her daughter, then at Eli, then back at her daughter. What do we have to lose? She whispered. Everything, Sky said simply. We could lose everything if this doesn't work. But we already lost it once. Maybe we can lose it better this time. It was the saddest, wisest thing Eli had ever heard a 10-year-old say. That night after they left, Eli didn't work on any cars. He sat in his garage with all the lights off and thought about his daughter Sarah, who died when she was 9, whose laugh he could still hear sometimes in the quiet moments, whose medical bills had bankrupted him and cost him his marriage and left him with nothing but this garage and the knowledge that sometimes love wasn't enough. He thought about Victoria Hart, who had all the money in the world and couldn't buy her daughter's healing. He thought about Sky, who moved her toes in secret and protected her mother from Hope. And he thought about the fact that he just promised something he had no business promising, to people who had every reason not to trust him, and he had 7 days to figure out what the hell he was doing. He pulled out his phone and started researching. By morning, he'd read 47 medical journal articles, watched 36 videos on neurological rehabilitation, and filled a notebook with questions he didn't know how to answer. Day 1 started with Victoria and Sky arriving at exactly 9 o'clock, the SUV pulling into the garage like it belonged there now. Sky rolled in with more confidence, and Victoria carried a leather bag that looked expensive and overstuffed. I brought her medical records, Victoria said, setting the bag on the workbench with a thud. All of them. 3 years' worth. MRIs, X-rays, doctor's notes, therapy reports. Everything. Eli looked at the bag, then at Victoria. I can't read most of that, he said honestly. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what half those terms mean. But you'll look. I'll look. Sky wheeled closer. What are we doing today? Eli pulled over his rolling stool. Today we're mapping. Mapping what? Every place you can feel. Every place you can't. Every place where feeling is partial or weird or inconsistent. We're going to figure out exactly what your body is telling you, without anyone saying what it should or shouldn't be doing. He reached for a legal pad and drew a rough outline of legs. This is going to be boring and slow, and we're going to do it anyway. For the next hour, Eli worked his way up from Sky's toes, pressing gently on different spots, asking what she felt. Sky closed her eyes and concentrated, and Victoria stood to the side, barely breathing. Toes, yes, kind of, Sky said. Like they're far away, but there. Ball of foot sometimes. Not today. Arch, nothing. Heel, maybe? It's hard to tell. They worked up her foot, her ankle, her calf. The pattern was inconsistent, scattered, with islands of sensation and seas of numbness. But it was there. By the time they reached her knee, Sky was exhausted, her face pale with concentration. That's enough for today, Eli said. Victoria opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Can I ask you something? Sky said, her eyes still closed. Sure. Why did your daughter die? The garage went silent. Victoria inhaled sharply. Sky, it's okay, Eli said, though his voice came out rough. He sat back on his stool and thought about whether to tell the truth, and then remembered he'd promised Sky he always would. She had a disease called transverse myelitis. It's an inflammation of the spinal cord. Came on suddenly. One day she was fine, and the next day she couldn't move her legs. The doctor said it might resolve on its own, that kids sometimes recovered. But for Sarah it got worse instead of better. It moved up her body. Eventually it affected her breathing. He paused. She died in the hospital 3 months after it started. She was 9 years old. Sky opened her eyes. I'm sorry. Me too. Is that why you're helping me? Because you couldn't help her. It was such a direct question, cutting through every polite fiction. Partly, Eli said. And partly because you reminded me that broken doesn't always mean unfixable. Sky nodded slowly. Sarah sounds like she was brave. She was. She was braver than I was. She used to tell the doctors jokes when they came to check on her. Even at the end, she was trying to make everyone else feel better. Eli's throat closed up and he had to stop talking. Victoria's hand found his shoulder. Just for a second, just the briefest touch, but it steadied something that was shaking inside him. They left after that, and Eli sat alone in his garage surrounded by Victoria's medical records. He opened the first file and started reading. The language was dense and technical, full of words like spinal cord contusion, an incomplete SCI, and Asia Impairment Scale Grade B. He didn't understand most of it, but he understood enough. The MRI showed damage, significant damage, compression fractures in the lumbar spine, traumatic injury to the nerve tissue. Every doctor's note said the same thing in different ways. Prognosis poor for recovery of motor function below L2. But there was something in the radiology report from 6 months ago that caught his eye. A note that said unexpected signal patterns in lower lumbar segments, unclear etiology. He pulled out his phone and Googled the terms. After 20 minutes of reading, he understood that sometimes the MRI showed changes that the doctors couldn't explain. Changes that might mean healing or might mean nothing, or might mean something nobody had a name for yet. He called the number on the radiology report. It was a long shot, but long shots were all he had. A receptionist answered, and Eli asked to speak to the radiologist who'd written the report. Dr. Chun doesn't take calls from patients, the receptionist said. I'm not a patient, Eli said. He paused. I'm a consultant looking at a case. It's regarding a patient named Skyheart. There was a pause. I'll transfer you to his assistant. 5 minutes later, a woman's voice came on the line. This is Dr. Chin's office. You're calling about Skyheart? Yes. I'm looking at her MRI from 6 months ago, and there's a note about unexpected signal patterns. I wanted to know if Dr. Chun could explain what that means. Who are you? A friend of the family. They asked me to review her records. The assistant paused. Hold please. 3 minutes passed. Then a man's voice came on the line, tired and rushed. This is Dr. Chun. You're asking about the heart girl? Yes, sir. Are you a physician? No, sir. It's complicated. It's always complicated with this case. Look, I don't have time for this, but I'll tell you what I told her mother. There's something weird on that scan. The damage is there, no question, but there's also some kind of reorganization happening. Like the neural tissue is trying to reroute around the injury. I've seen it before in younger patients with incomplete injuries, but never this pronounced. Most of my colleagues think it's just artifact on the scan imaging noise. But I've been doing this for 20 years and I don't think it's noise. Eli's heart started beating faster. What do you think it is? I think her nervous system is doing something we don't fully understand yet. Rebuilding. Compensating. Finding new pathways. But here's the problem. It doesn't show up on standard neurological tests. The reflexes are still absent. The strength tests are still negative. So according to every clinical measure we have, there's no functional recovery. But the imaging suggests otherwise. What would you do if she was your daughter? Eli asked. There was a long pause. I'd keep hoping, Dr. Chun said quietly. And I'd find someone willing to look beyond the tests. Because those tests are designed to measure what we expect to see, not what we don't expect. And this girl, she's doing something unexpected. He hung up before Eli could ask anything else. Eli sat there with the phone in his hand and Victoria's medical records spread across his workbench, and he felt the weight of what he'd taken on settling onto his shoulders like a transmission he'd have to carry alone. Day 2, Sky came in with a notebook. I wrote down everything I felt yesterday after we left, she said, opening it to show Eli pages filled with small, careful handwriting. The tingling in my left foot lasted for 20 minutes. The right foot felt cold, but in a good way, like I could feel cold for the first time in forever. And at dinner, when I was thinking about something else, my knee twitched. Mom saw it. Victoria nodded, her eyes red like she'd been crying or hadn't slept. It was real. It happened twice. Today, Eli tried something different. He set up a mirror at an angle where Sky could watch her own legs while he worked with them. I read about this, he said. Visual feedback. Sometimes watching your body move helps your brain remember how to make it move. It's used for phantom limb pain, but I thought, maybe it works in reverse too. Sky positioned herself so she could see her reflection. Eli touched her left knee and said, "Watch your leg, not my hand. Just watch and think about what it feels like." He pressed gently, and Sky stared at her reflection with an intensity that made the air feel thin. "I feel it," she whispered, "like pressure from far away. Now watch." Eli pressed again, and this time Sky's quadricep muscle twitched visibly. Her eyes went wide. Did you make that happen or did I? I don't know, Eli said honestly. Try to do it again without me touching you. Sky's face scrunched in concentration. Her leg didn't move. She tried again. Nothing. Frustration flickered across her face. It's okay, Eli said. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a nervous system. Victoria, who'd been silent until now, suddenly spoke. When she was learning to walk as a baby, she did it the same way. She'd take one step, then nothing for days. Then 2 steps. Then nothing for a week. Then suddenly she was running. She looked at Eli with something desperate in her eyes. Is that what this is? Is she relearning? Maybe, Eli said. Or maybe she never forgot. Maybe her brain knows how, but the signals are taking the long way around to get there. They worked for another 30 minutes trying different positions, different types of touch, different visualizations. By the end, Sky could produce that same quad twitch 3 times out of 10 attempts. It wasn't much. It was everything. Day 3. Someone else was waiting in the garage when Eli arrived at 7 in the morning. A man in an expensive suit stood next to a black sedan, and when he saw Eli, he straightened up with the posture of someone used to being obeyed. Eli Morrison? The man asked. That's me. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Hart Technologies, and I need to speak with you about Victoria Hart. Eli unlocked the garage door, his stomach tight. What about her? Marcus followed him inside, looking around the garage with barely concealed disdain. Mrs. Hart has been bringing her daughter here for 3 days. She's been late to meetings, distracted during conference calls, and yesterday she told the board she might need to take a leave of absence. This is during our most critical quarter. Our Q4 results determine whether we secure our next round of funding. Eli turned on the lights and faced Marcus. And I need to know what you're doing with her. What you're promising her. Because Victoria Hart is not a woman who makes irrational decisions, which means you must be very convincing. What exactly are you selling? The accusation landed like a slap. I'm not selling anything, Eli said, his voice hard. Then what are you doing? Helping her daughter. You're a mechanic. I'm aware. Marcus stepped closer, and there was something dangerous in his expression now. Let me be very clear. Victoria Hart is worth $3 billion. Her daughter is disabled. That makes them targets for every con artist, faith healer, and snake oil salesman in America. I've seen it before. People who promise miracles, who prey on desperate parents, who take their money and their hope and leave them with nothing. I haven't taken any money, Eli said. Yet. The word hung between them. Is that what you think? Eli asked quietly. That I'm running some kind of scam? I think you're in over your head, Marcus said. I think you have a disabled daughter yourself, had one, I should say, my condolences, and I think you see a second chance in Sky Hart. I think your intentions might even be good. But good intentions don't qualify you to treat a child with a spinal cord injury. You could hurt her. You could give her false hope that destroys her when it doesn't pan out. And when that happens, when Victoria realizes this was all a mistake, she's going to be devastated. And that devastation is going to cost the company, the shareholders, and the 15,000 people who work for Hart Technologies. Eli met his eyes. Are you threatening me? I'm asking you to think about the consequences, Marcus said. Walk away now before this becomes a problem. I'll compensate you for your time. Name a number. Get out of my garage. Marcus didn't move. $50,000. Cash. Today. Just tell Victoria that you made a mistake, that you can't help Sky, that she should go back to her actual doctors. No. 100,000. I said no. Marcus pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times, then held it up so Eli could see. It was a bank transfer screen with Eli's name and routing number already entered. The amount field said $200,000. $200,000, Marcus said. That's more than you'll make in 5 years. Take it. Walk away. Let them get back to their lives. Eli looked at the screen, at the number that could pay off every debt he had, that could let him fix up the garage, that could give him breathing room for the first time since Sarah died. He thought about what that money could buy. And then he thought about Sky's face when she'd moved her toes, about Victoria's desperate hope, about the way they both looked at him like he was someone who kept promises. If you don't leave right now, Eli said quietly. I'm going to call the police and tell them Heart Technologies COO is trying to bribe me to stop providing care to a disabled child. Marcus's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. Marcus lowered his phone, and his expression shifted into something colder, more calculating. Then let me give you some free advice. Victoria Hart is obsessed with fixing her daughter, because she blames herself for the accident. She was driving that day. She was distracted by a work call. She didn't see the drunk driver until it was too late. Sky's injuries are Victoria's guilt made physical, and that guilt has made her desperate, which makes her vulnerable to people like you. He moved toward the door, then paused. When this falls apart, and it will, Victoria will direct all that guilt toward you instead of herself, and she has the resources to destroy your life in ways you can't imagine. Legal teams, investigative journalists, regulatory boards. She could make it so you never work again. Are you done? Eli asked. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. I'm trying to protect her. By bribing me? By removing a liability before it becomes a crisis. He walked out, got into his sedan and drove away. Eli stood in the garage as the sun came up, and his hands were shaking. Not from fear. From rage. Because everything Marcus had said was designed to make him doubt himself, to make him feel small and unqualified and dangerous. And the worst part was that some of it was true. He wasn't a doctor. He had no medical training. He could be wrong about everything. But when Victoria and Sky arrived an hour later, and Sky rolled in with that same careful hope in her eyes, Eli made a choice. Someone came to see me this morning, Eli said to Victoria. Marcus Webb. Victoria's face went pale then red. What did he say? He offered me $200,000 to tell you I can't help Sky and to walk away. Victoria closed her eyes. I'm going to fire him. Don't, Eli said. Victoria's eyes snapped open. He tried to bribe you. He tried to protect you, Eli corrected. He thinks I'm a con artist. He thinks I'm going to hurt you and Sky. And from where he's standing, that's a reasonable conclusion. But you're not. How do you know? Eli asked. You've known me for 3 days. You're trusting me with your daughter based on almost nothing. Marcus sees that and it scares him because he cares about you. He paused. And because he's right that I'm not qualified for this. I'm making it up as I go. Every night I research for hours trying to understand things I have no training in. I could be completely wrong about everything. Sky, who'd been listening silently, spoke up. But you believe me? Yes. The doctors don't. They think I'm confused or making it up or experiencing phantom sensations. You believe what I say I feel? Yes. Then you're more qualified than they are, Sky said simply. Victoria made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She's right. They stopped listening to her 6 months ago. They stopped seeing her as a person and started seeing her as a diagnosis. She looked at Eli. I don't care about your credentials. I care that when you look at my daughter, you see someone who's possible instead of someone who's finished. Eli felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Okay. But you need to know, if Marcus is willing to bribe me, he's probably going to take other steps. He might try to discredit me. He might call regulatory boards or medical licensing agencies. This could get complicated. Let it get complicated, Victoria said. I've been fighting complicated for 3 years. What's one more battle? Day 4 Sky walked. Not far. Not well. Not in any way that would hold up to medical scrutiny. But she stood up from her wheelchair with Eli supporting her weight. And she moved her right leg forward 6 inches while Eli held her steady and Victoria's hands covered her mouth and tears streamed down her face. Again, Sky said, her voice shaking with effort and adrenaline. I want to do it again. Tomorrow, Eli said, easing her back into the wheelchair. Your muscles aren't used to this. We push too hard too fast, you could hurt yourself. I don't care. I care, Eli said firmly. And your mom cares. 6 inches today. 12 inches tomorrow. We build slowly or we don't build at all. Sky looked like she wanted to argue, but then she sagged back in her wheelchair exhausted. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her legs trembled with the effort of that one small step. But she was smiling. It was the first real smile Eli had seen on her face. Victoria knelt down next to the wheelchair and put her forehead against Sky's, and they stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, and Eli turned away to give them privacy. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Morrison? A woman's voice, official and cold. Yes. This is Carol Hendricks from the Ohio Department of Child and Family Services. We've received a complaint regarding a child in your care. We need to schedule a home visit to investigate. Eli's blood went cold. I don't have any children in my care. We have a report that you've been providing unlicensed medical treatment to a minor named Skyheart. The complaint alleges that you're practicing medicine without a license and potentially endangering a disabled child. Marcus. It had to be Marcus. I'm not practicing medicine, Eli said carefully. I'm helping a friend's daughter with some exercises. The complaint also alleges that you're accepting payment from the child's mother in exchange for promising medical miracles you cannot deliver. That's not true. I haven't accepted any payment. Nevertheless, we're required to investigate all complaints involving the welfare of minors. We'll need to interview you, the child, and the mother. We'll also need to inspect your facility where this treatment is taking place. It's not treatment, it's... Mr. Morrison, I understand this is stressful, but cooperation with our investigation is mandatory. If you refuse, we can obtain a court order. I'd prefer we handle this voluntarily. Eli looked at Victoria and Sky, who were still holding each other, still celebrating that 6 inches of impossible progress. When? Eli asked. Tomorrow. 10 o'clock. At your garage. The line went dead. Eli stood there with the phone in his hand, and he thought about Marcus's warning. This was just the beginning. Victoria saw his face. What's wrong? Child Services is investigating me. Someone filed a complaint saying I'm practicing medicine without a license and endangering Sky. Victoria stood up slowly, and her expression transformed into something Eli had never seen before. Cold, calculating fury. Marcus. Probably. I'm going to destroy him. Victoria. No, she said, her voice cutting like broken glass. He went after my daughter. He used the system to threaten my daughter's care. There are lines you don't cross, and he just crossed all of them. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Legal. Yes, it's Victoria. I need you to prepare termination paperwork for Marcus Webb, effective immediately. Cause gross misconduct. And I need you to start a full audit of every decision he's made in the past 2 years. If there's anything, that's even slightly questionable, I want to know about it. She paused, listening. I don't care if he's been with the company for 10 years. I don't care if the board likes him. He weaponized Child Services against my daughter. He's done. She hung up and looked at Eli. What do we do about the investigation? We cooperate, Eli said. We tell the truth. We show them what we've been doing. We let them interview Sky. We let them see that she's not in danger. And if they decide to shut this down? Sky asked quietly. Both adults turned to look at her. Then I'll do what I did before, Sky said. I'll stop moving where people can see. I'll hide it. I'll pretend I'm still completely paralyzed, because that's what everyone wants to believe anyway. The resignation in her voice was devastating. No, Victoria said. No. You are not going back to hiding. Not ever again. Then what do we do? Sky asked. Victoria looked at Eli, and in her eyes, he saw the same question. He thought about Sarah, about the times he'd fought with doctors and insurance companies and hospital administrators, about the times he'd lost because he didn't have money or power or connections. He thought about how Victoria had all those things, and how even she couldn't protect her daughter from a system that wanted to put them in neat boxes with neat labels. We document everything, Eli said. Videos. Measurements. Daily logs. We make this scientific. We turn this into data they can't dismiss. He looked at Victoria. And we get someone on our side who has actual credentials. Who? Victoria asked. Eli pulled out his phone and found the number he'd called days ago. The radiologist who saw something weird on Sky's MRI. Dr. Chun. If he's willing to support what we're doing, that gives us credibility. What if he says no? Then we're exactly where we are now, Eli said. But I don't think he will. He told me to find someone willing to look beyond the tests. I think he meant someone like me. That night, Eli called Dr. Chin's office and left a message explaining the situation. At 11 o'clock, his phone rang. "This is David Chun," the voice said. "You called about the heart case." "Yes, sir. We need help. I saw her mother fired her COO today. It's all over the tech news. Is that related to you?" "Yes. Tell me what's been happening." Eli told him everything: the toe movements, the mirror therapy, the 6-inch step. He told him about Marcus's bribe and the child services investigation. He told him about Sky's notebook full of sensations that no test could measure. When he finished, there was a long silence. "I could lose my license for this," Dr. Chun said. "For what?" "For supporting unlicensed treatment of a minor with a spinal cord injury. For going against the consensus of 17 other physicians. For putting my professional reputation behind a mechanic's intuition." "Then don't," Eli said. "I'm not asking you to risk your career." "But I'm going to anyway," Dr. Chun said. "Because I've been thinking about Sky heart scans for 6 months. Because I've seen something I can't explain with current medical understanding. And because if we're wrong about this, if the body can heal in ways we don't expect, then we're failing every patient who could recover but won't because we tell them it's impossible." He paused. "I'll come to the child services interview. I'll bring her scans. I'll testify that there's biological evidence supporting the possibility of recovery. I can't promise it'll be enough, but I can give you credibility." "Why?" Eli asked. "Why risk it?" "Because 20 years ago, I had a patient who everyone said would never walk again. And one day I saw him in the grocery store. Walking. Not well, but walking. I asked him how, and he said he just kept trying, even after everyone told him to stop. Even after his doctors said he was wasting his time." Dr. Chin's voice got quiet. "I never forgot that. And I never forgave myself for being one of the doctors who told him to give up." Day 5, the child services investigator arrived exactly at 10. Carol Hendricks was a thin woman in her 50s with the exhausted eyes of someone who'd seen too many bad situations and not enough good endings. She carried a clipboard and wore comfortable shoes, and when she stepped into the garage, her expression was carefully neutral. Dr. Chun arrived 5 minutes later, carrying a laptop and a file folder thick with medical images. Victoria and Sky were already there. Sky in her wheelchair, Victoria standing behind her with one hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Thank you for meeting with me," Carol said, her voice professional but not unkind. "I want to start by saying that my only concern here is Sky's welfare. This isn't an adversarial process unless someone makes it one." She looked at each of them in turn. "I've reviewed the complaint. It alleges that Mr. Morrison is providing medical treatment without a license, making promises of miracle cures, and potentially endangering a child with a serious disability. Mr. Morrison, would you like to respond to these allegations?" Eli stood in the middle of his garage, grease still under his fingernails, and chose his words carefully. "I'm not providing medical treatment. I'm helping Sky explore what her body can do. We're not running tests or prescribing medication, or doing anything that requires a medical license. We're just paying attention." "Paying attention to what?" "To her. To what she says she feels. To movements that everyone else told her she was imagining." Carol wrote something on her clipboard. "And what kind of movements are we talking about?" Sky spoke up before anyone else could. "I can move my toes. And my foot. And yesterday I took a step." Carol's pen stopped. She looked at Sky, and for the first time her professional mask slipped slightly. "The complaint says you've been paralyzed from the waist down for 3 years following a car accident." "That's what my doctors say," Sky agreed. "But it's not what my body says." "Show me," Carol said. Sky looked at Eli. He nodded. Sky closed her eyes, concentrated for a moment, and then her right foot moved. Not a twitch. Not a spasm. A deliberate dorsiflex, toes pulling toward her shin, holding for 2 seconds, then relaxing. Carol stared. "How long have you been able to do that?" 6 months in private. "For days here where people believe me." "And your doctors?" "Say it's reflexive. Involuntary. Not real voluntary movement." Carol turned to Dr. Chun. "And you are?" "Dr. David Chun." I'm a radiologist at Cleveland Medical Center. I've been following Sky's case since her initial injury. He opened his laptop and pulled up an MRI image. This is Sky's scan from 3 years ago, immediately post-accident. You can see the spinal cord compression here and here. He pointed. Significant trauma. The consensus was that recovery was unlikely. He pulled up another image. This is from 6 months ago. Notice these signal changes in the lower lumbar segments. This pattern suggests neural reorganization, the nervous system attempting to route around damage. Carol leaned closer. What does that mean in plain English? It means her body is trying to heal itself, Dr. Chun said, in ways that don't show up on standard neurological tests, but that are visible on imaging. In ways that medical textbooks say shouldn't happen, but sometimes do anyway. So the movement is real? The movement is real, Dr. Chun confirmed. And Mr. Morrison's approach, focusing on what the patient reports rather than what tests predict, is actually more aligned with current research on neuroplasticity than the standard protocol of telling patients what they can't do. Carol wrote several more things on her clipboard. Mrs. Hart, you're paying Mr. Morrison for this? No, Victoria said. He's refused payment every time I've offered. Why? Carol asked Eli. Because this isn't about money, Eli said. It's about. He stopped, trying to find words for something he wasn't sure he understood himself. My daughter died 7 years ago. She had a different condition but the same experience of doctors who stopped listening, who stopped seeing her as a person who might surprise them. And when I look at Sky, I see someone who's been carrying hope in secret, because no one gave her permission to hope out loud. That's not something you charge money for. Carol studied him for a long moment. Are you promising Sky that she'll walk again? No. I'm promising to believe her when she tells me what she feels. That's all. Carol turned back to Sky. Do you feel safe here? Yes. Does Mr. Morrison ever make you do things that hurt or scare you? He makes me stop when I want to keep going, Sky said. He's more careful than I am. And you want to keep coming here? Yes. Carol wrote more notes. Then she set down her clipboard and looked at all of them. I'm going to be honest. This is the strangest case I've ever investigated. The complaint paints Mr. Morrison as a predator taking advantage of a desperate family. But what I see is a child who's more engaged and hopeful than most disabled kids I meet. I see a mother who's present and protective. I see a medical professional willing to support unconventional treatment. And I see a mechanic who's probably in over his head, but seems to genuinely care about this child's welfare. She paused. I'm going to recommend that this case be closed with no finding of endangerment. But, she looked at Eli. I'm also going to strongly suggest that you formalize this arrangement. Get a physical therapist involved. Document everything. Create a paper trail that shows this is legitimate therapeutic exploration, not some guy in a garage playing doctor. I can arrange that, Victoria said immediately. I'll hire a licensed PT to supervise and document every session. Carol nodded. Then we're done here. She picked up her clipboard. For what it's worth, I hope this works. I've seen too many kids written off because adults stopped believing in them. If Sky is one of the rare ones who beats the odds, she deserves every chance to do it. After she left, the four of them stood in the garage in silence. Then Victoria started crying, not sad crying, but the kind of crying that came from months of held breath finally being released. Dr. Chun shook Eli's hand. You did something remarkable here, he said quietly. You made people pay attention. That's harder than medicine. After he left too, it was just Eli, Victoria, and Sky. Marcus isn't going to stop, Victoria said, wiping her eyes. This was just round one. I know, Eli said. So what do we do? Sky asked. Eli looked at this 10-year-old girl who'd taken one 6-inch step and changed the trajectory of all their lives. We keep going, he said. And we get ready for whatever comes next. What came next arrived 6 days later in the form of a news van. Day 11 started with Eli arriving at his garage to find a white van with a satellite dish parked across the street, and a woman with perfect hair and a microphone standing next to a cameraman. Mr. Morrison, she called out when she saw him. Tina Schwartz, Channel 7 News. We're doing a story on alternative treatments for disabled children. And we heard you've been working with Sky Hart, daughter of billionaire Victoria Hart. Can we ask you some questions? Eli's stomach dropped. No comment, he said, unlocking the garage. Is it true that Sky Hart has regained movement after working with you? I said no comment. The medical community is skeptical of unproven treatments. How do you respond to critics who say you're giving false hope to desperate families? Eli turned to face her. I'm not giving anyone hope. I'm just listening to a kid that everyone else stopped listening to. Now please leave. Is Victoria Hart paying you? No. But you're providing a service. How do you benefit from this arrangement? I don't. Tina stepped closer, and her expression shifted into something that looked like concern but felt like hunting. Mr. Morrison, our research shows that your daughter died 7 years ago from a neurological condition. Some people might say you're using Sky Hart to process your own grief. What would you say to that? Eli's hands clenched into fists. I'd say you should be ashamed of yourself. Is that a denial? It's a statement that you're exploiting a child's medical situation for ratings, and you're doing exactly what you're accusing me of. Using Sky Hart for your own purposes. He walked into the garage and pulled the door down behind him, cutting off Tina's follow-up question. His phone rang immediately. Victoria, have you seen the news? She asked. They're outside my garage right now. They're outside my office too. And my house. And Sky's school. They're everywhere. Her voice was tight with controlled panic. Marcus talked to them. He must have. He gave them the story. What do they know? Everything. The accident. The paralysis. The fact that she's been coming to your garage. They're calling it Miracle Mechanic and Billionaire's Desperate Gamble. They're making it sound like I'm a grief-stricken mother throwing money at false hope. But you're not paying me. They don't care about facts, Victoria said. They care about narrative. And the narrative of a rich black woman so desperate to fix her disabled daughter that she'll trust a random mechanic over 17 doctors. That's too good for them to resist. She took a shaky breath. We need to shut this down. No more sessions. Not until this blows over. Victoria. I can't have them following Sky. I can't have cameras pointed at her every time we leave the house. She's 10 years old. She deserves privacy. What does Sky think? There was a pause. Then Victoria said, Hold on. A moment later, Sky's voice came through the phone. I think we should keep going. Sky baby, they're going to follow you, Victoria said in the background. They're going to film you. They're going to make this into a circus. So, Sky said, let them film. Let them see me move. Let them talk to the 17 doctors who said I couldn't. Maybe some other kid who's been told they're finished will see me on the news and think maybe they're not. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched out. Then Victoria's voice came back, thick with emotion. When did you get so brave? I've always been brave, Sky said. I just had to be quiet brave before. Now I get to be loud brave. That afternoon, Victoria and Sky arrived at the garage with the news van following them. Tina Schwartz and her cameraman tried to get footage, but Victoria's security team, 2 large men in suits who'd appeared from nowhere, kept them at a distance. Inside the garage, Sky was shaking slightly, adrenaline and nervousness making her hands tremble. It's okay if you don't want to work today, Eli said. We can just talk. Or you can tell me to take you home. I want to walk, Sky said. Like really walk. Not 6 inches. Not 1 step. I want to walk across the garage. Sky, we've been building up slowly. I know. But there are cameras outside. And if I'm going to be on the news anyway, I want them to show something real. She looked at Eli with fierce determination. I've been practicing at home. Every night. Mom doesn't know, but I've been using the parallel bars she installed in the physical therapy room. I can do more than you've seen. Victoria's head snapped toward her daughter. What? I didn't want to tell you until I was sure, Sky said. I didn't want to get your hopes up if I was wrong. But I'm not wrong. I can do this. Eli looked at Victoria. She looked back at him. They were standing on the edge of something that could go spectacularly right or devastatingly wrong. If we do this, Eli said carefully, and you can't do it, or if you fall, or if it doesn't work the way you think it will, then we try again tomorrow, Sky finished. But we have to try today. While people are watching. Because if no one sees it, they'll say it never happened. She was right. Eli knew she was right. But he also knew that putting this much pressure on a 10-year-old who'd been paralyzed for 3 years was insane. Victoria? He asked. It's her body, Victoria said quietly. It's her choice. Eli pulled over the parallel bars that the physical therapist Victoria had hired. A woman named Patricia, who came 3 times a week now, had brought in. They were adjustable aluminum bars set about 3 feet apart, designed to help people learn to walk again. Sky wheeled up to them and locked her wheelchair. I need help getting up, she said. Eli moved to her left side, Victoria to her right. Together they helped Sky stand, supporting her weight until her hands gripped the bars. Sky's legs trembled. Sweat broke out on her forehead immediately. But she was standing. Okay, she breathed. Okay. She slid her right hand forward on the bar. Her left leg shifted slightly. Then her right leg moved. A small step, maybe 8 inches, but it was deliberate and controlled. Victoria gasped. Eli held his breath. Sky took another step. Then another. Her legs shook violently. Her knuckles went white on the bars. But she kept moving. 1 step. 2. 3. 4. 5. She was halfway across the garage. That's enough, Victoria said, her voice breaking. Baby, that's amazing. You can stop? Not yet, Sky gritted out. 6 steps. 7. Her right leg nearly buckled on the 8th step, and Eli lunged forward to steady her, but Sky caught herself on the bars. I'm okay, she panted. I'm okay. 8 steps. 9. 10. She reached the end of the bars 12 feet from where she'd started, and her legs gave out. Eli and Victoria caught her, lowering her carefully to the floor, and Sky sat there gasping like she'd run a marathon. I did it, she whispered. I did it. Victoria was sobbing. Full, ugly, uncontrollable sobs, her whole body shaking as she held her daughter. You did it, she kept saying. Oh my God, you did it. Eli stepped back to give them space, and his own eyes were burning. He turned away, pressing his palms against the workbench, and he let himself feel it. The grief of what Sarah had never gotten to do, the joy of what Sky just had, the terrible, beautiful weight of being present for someone else's miracle. Behind him, Victoria and Sky were crying together on the garage floor, and outside, the news cameras were filming the closed garage door, waiting for a story they didn't know had just happened inside. That night, Eli's phone rang at 11 o'clock. Unknown number again. He answered. Mr. Morrison, this is Dr. Patricia Reeves, the physical therapist working with Sky. Yes, I know who you are. I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand that I'm risking my license by saying this. Eli sat up. What is it? I reviewed the footage from the session today. Victoria had cameras set up in the garage. She's been documenting everything for legal protection. She sent me the video of Sky walking. Dr. Reeves paused. What you're doing is working. And I don't mean kind of working or maybe working. I mean it's producing results that are clinically impossible, according to every model of spinal cord injury recovery I've studied in 20 years of practice. But the medical establishment isn't going to accept this. They're going to call it a misdiagnosis. They're going to say Sky was never really paralyzed, that the original doctors made an error, that this is all some kind of elaborate mistake. Because accepting that she's actually recovering means accepting that we don't understand neurological injury as well as we think we do. And doctors don't like admitting that. What are you saying? I'm saying you should prepare for a fight. A big one. Because when this goes public, really public, there are going to be people who try to tear you down. Medical boards. Professional organizations. People who will say you're dangerous and unqualified, and that you got lucky with one case. She paused. But there are also going to be other families. Families with kids like Sky who were told to give up. And they're going to come to you asking for the same thing Victoria did. And you need to decide now whether you're ready for that. Eli looked around his small garage, at the oil stains and the worn tools and the space that had been his refuge from the world for 7 years. He thought about what Dr. Reeves was describing. Being at the center of controversy, having his life examined, dealing with desperate families and hostile doctors and media attention. Everything in him wanted to say no. I'll think about it, he said. Think fast, Dr. Reeves said. Because the news story airs tomorrow. And once it does, everything changes. She hung up. Eli sat in the dark, and he thought about choices and consequences and the fact that sometimes doing one good thing opened doors you weren't ready to walk through. The news story aired the next morning at 6. Eli didn't watch it, but he knew when it happened because his phone started ringing at 6:03 and didn't stop. By 7 o'clock, there were 5 cars parked outside his garage, families with disabled children sitting in their vehicles, waiting for him to open up. By 8 o'clock, the street was blocked. By 9 o'clock, the police had arrived to manage the crowd that had formed. 30 people, maybe 40 parents holding photographs of their children, medical records in folders, hope and desperation written across every face. Eli stood inside his locked garage, looking out through the window at the crowd, and he felt like he was drowning. His phone buzzed. Victoria. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately. "I didn't know they would air that. They ambushed me outside my office yesterday, asked about Sky's progress, and I said she was doing better than anyone expected. I didn't think they'd turn it into." She stopped. "Have you seen it?" "No. They made you look like a miracle worker. They used footage of us entering your garage, overlaid with dramatic music and a voiceover about hope and faith and impossible recoveries. They interviewed Marcus, who said I'd lost my mind. They interviewed 3 of Sky's former doctors, who all said what you're doing is medically unsound. And then they interviewed Dr. Chun, who defended you. It's a mess. And now every family in Ohio with a disabled child thinks you can save them." Eli looked at the crowd again. A woman was crying in her car. A man was pacing back and forth, checking his watch. A little boy in a wheelchair was pointing at the garage like it was Disneyland. "What do I do?" Eli asked. "I don't know," Victoria said, and her voice cracked. "This is my fault. I brought this to your door. I put you in this position. If you want to walk away, if you want to disappear and never see us again, I'll understand." Eli thought about walking away. He thought about packing up and moving to a different city, starting over somewhere no one knew his name or his story. He thought about how easy it would be to just vanish. Then he thought about Sky's face when she'd taken those 10 steps. And he knew he couldn't leave. "I'm going to talk to them," he said. "Eli, there are 40 people out there." "I know. But they came here because they're desperate. Because someone they love has been written off. I know what that feels like. I can't ignore them." "What are you going to tell them?" "The truth," Eli said. "That I'm not a miracle worker. That I can't save everyone. That I got lucky with one kid who was determined to prove everyone wrong." He hung up and opened the garage door. The crowd surged forward and the noise was overwhelming. Dozens of voices talking at once, asking questions, pleading for help, offering money. Eli held up his hands and slowly the crowd quieted. "I know why you're here," Eli said, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "I know you saw the news. I know you think I can help your kids the way I help Skyheart. And I need you to understand something. I don't know what I'm doing." A murmur ran through the crowd. "I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not trained in any of this. I'm a mechanic who listened to one kid that everyone else had stopped listening to. That's all. And what worked for Sky might not work for your children. Probably won't work. Because every injury is different. Every body is different. Every situation is different." A woman in the front row was crying. "But you have to try. My son was in a car accident 2 years ago. The doctor said he'd never move his arms again. But sometimes I see his fingers twitch. Just like Sky's toes. And his doctors say the same thing, that it's reflexes, that it doesn't mean anything. But what if they're wrong? What if my son is like Sky?" Eli looked at her. At the hope that was destroying her from the inside out. "What if he's not?" he asked gently. "What if I try to help, and it doesn't work? And all I do is give you false hope that makes everything harder." "But what if he is?" she repeated. "What if you don't try, and we never know?" Other voices joined in. "My daughter has cerebral palsy. My son has a traumatic brain injury. My niece has muscular dystrophy. Please, just look at her. We'll pay anything." Eli felt the weight of their desperation crushing him. These weren't people looking for a miracle. These were people who'd already been told miracles were impossible, and they were reaching for the last thread of hope they could find. "I can't," Eli said, and his voice broke. I can't help all of you. I don't have the knowledge or the resources or the ability. I'm one person. I'm already in over my head with one child. If I take on more, I'll fail them. I'll fail you. And when I do, you'll hate me for it, and you'll be right to. The crowd went silent. The woman who'd spoken first stepped closer. Then just look at him, she said. 5 minutes. That's all. Just tell me if you see what I see. Tell me if I'm crazy for hoping. Eli looked at her face, at the exhaustion and the fear and the love that was tearing her apart. He thought about Victoria standing in this same spot 12 days ago, asking the same thing. He thought about the choice he'd made then, and how it had led to this moment, and how every choice from here would lead somewhere he couldn't predict. What's your name? He asked. Jennifer. Jennifer Collins. And your son? Michael. He's 8. Where is he? Jennifer turned and pointed to a blue sedan where a little boy sat in the back seat, watching through the window. Eli walked toward the car, and the crowd parted. He opened the back door and crouched down so he was at Michael's eye level. The boy looked at him with the same careful evaluation that Sky had used. Hi, Michael, Eli said. I'm Eli. I know, Michael said. His voice was quiet, a little slurred. You helped that girl walk. I listened to her, Eli corrected. She did the walking herself. Can you listen to me? Eli looked at this 8-year-old boy who'd been in his own prison for 2 years, and he felt something crack open in his chest. Yeah, he said. I can listen, but I need you to understand. Listening doesn't mean fixing. Listening just means believing you when you tell me what you feel. Can you accept that? Michael nodded. That's more than my doctors do. Eli spent 10 minutes with Michael, asking him about sensation and movement, watching his hands, listening to his careful descriptions of what his body felt like. And at the end of 10 minutes, Eli saw Michael's index finger move. Just barely, just a tiny twitch, but it was there. Jennifer saw it too. Her hand flew to her mouth. It's real, she whispered. It's real, isn't it? It's real, Eli confirmed. But I don't know what it means. I don't know if it means he'll recover function or if it's just isolated movement. I don't know anything except that it's real. But you'll help us figure it out? Jennifer asked. Eli looked at her, at the hope that was blooming across her face like spring after a too long winter. He looked at Michael, who was staring at his own finger like he'd never seen it before. He looked at the crowd of families still waiting, still hoping, still desperate. And he made a choice that would change everything again. I can't help all of you, he said, standing up and addressing the crowd. But I can listen to your kids. I can give you 1 hour each, 1 hour where I pay attention to what they say, what they feel, what they show me. No promises. No guarantees. No miracle cures. Just attention. Just belief. If you can accept that, then I'll do what I can. The crowd erupted. People were crying, thanking him, pulling out calendars to schedule appointments. Eli felt like he'd just agreed to carry a weight he couldn't possibly bear. But it was too late to take it back now. His phone rang. Victoria again. I'm watching the live news feed from outside your garage, she said. Did you just agree to see 40 families? Something like that. Eli, you can't. I know I can't. But I'm going to try anyway. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then you're going to need help. Real help. Medical supervision, documentation, legal protection. Let me make some calls. Victoria. You did this for Sky when you didn't have to. Let me do this for you. She hung up before he could argue. Over the next 6 hours, Eli saw 12 children. He spent an hour with each one, asking questions, watching for movement, listening to stories of injuries and recoveries and setbacks. Some of them showed tiny signs of movement that doctors had dismissed. Some of them showed nothing at all. With each family, Eli was honest, brutally, carefully honest. I see something, but I don't know what it means. I don't see voluntary movement. I'm sorry. Maybe. It's possible. But possible isn't the same as probable. By 4 o'clock, he was exhausted. His voice was raw, and there were still 20 families waiting. Victoria arrived at 4:30 with an entourage: Dr. Chun, Dr. Reeves the physical therapist, 2 other doctors Eli had never met, and a lawyer carrying a briefcase. This is Dr. Sarah Kim, pediatric neurologist, Victoria said, gesturing to a Korean woman in her 40s. and Dr. James Rodriguez, rehabilitation specialist. They both volunteered to help assess the children you're seeing. The lawyer is here to make sure we're doing everything by the book, so no one can accuse you of practicing medicine without a license. I can't pay them, Eli said. You're not paying them, Victoria said. I am. Consider it an investment in not letting you get destroyed for being decent. The doctors set up a makeshift examination area in a corner of the garage. For the rest of the afternoon and into the evening, they worked as a team. Eli did his initial assessment, then the doctors did their medical examinations, then Dr. Reeves created therapy recommendations. They saw 8 more children before the sun went down. Of the 20 children Eli had seen that day, 6 showed signs of movement that medical professionals had dismissed as reflexive. 4 of those 6 were deemed by the doctors to be good candidates for intensive therapy. The other 2 were unclear. 14 showed no voluntary movement at all, and Eli had to watch those families' hope die in real time. Those were the hardest. At 9 o'clock, the last family left, and Eli collapsed onto his rolling stool. The doctors were packing up their equipment. Victoria was on her phone coordinating something. Dr. Chun sat down next to Eli. You did something extraordinary today, he said. I destroyed people, Eli said. Some of those families came here with hope, and I sent them home with nothing. You sent them home with truth, Dr. Chun corrected. That's worth more than false hope. The families with children who showed no movement, they can stop wondering now. They can stop chasing treatments that won't work. They can start accepting and adapting. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing. I know. Dr. Chun stood up. But the 6 kids you identified, the ones we're going to help, they would have gone on being dismissed by their doctors. Their movement would have been called meaningless. They would have spent years doubting what their own bodies were telling them. You gave them permission to be right about themselves. That's not nothing either. After the doctors left, Victoria remained. She helped Eli clean up the garage in silence, folding chairs, organizing the files the families had left, throwing away empty coffee cups. Sky wants to see you, Victoria said finally. She saw the news coverage. She feels responsible. She shouldn't. I know. But she does. She's 10. Everything is about her at 10. Victoria paused. Can you come by the house tomorrow? Just to talk to her. She needs to hear from you that you're okay. Eli looked at Victoria, at the exhaustion in her face, at the way she was barely holding herself together. Are you okay? He asked. Victoria's careful composure cracked. No, she said. I'm not okay. I fired my COO. I'm in a war with my board of directors who think I'm having a breakdown. My daughter is the center of a media circus, and I dragged you into a nightmare you didn't ask for. I'm the opposite of okay. But Sky is walking. But Sky is walking, Victoria repeated, and she started crying. Not the elegant tears from before, but ugly, gasping sobs. She's walking, Eli. My baby is walking. And I don't know how to hold that joy and all this chaos at the same time. Eli stood up and, without thinking about whether it was appropriate, pulled Victoria into a hug. She clung to him like she was drowning, and they stood there in the middle of his garage while she cried 3 years of fear and hope and exhaustion into his shoulder. When she finally pulled back, her makeup was ruined and her eyes were red, but something in her face looked lighter. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. I got mascara on your shirt. I've had worse on this shirt. Victoria laughed, a sound somewhere between a sob and a giggle. How are you so calm about all of this? I'm not calm, Eli said. I'm terrified. But I learned a long time ago that when everything is falling apart, you just take the next step. You don't look at the whole staircase. Just the next step. What's the next step? Tomorrow I visit Sky. Then we figure out how to help the 6 kids we identified. Then we deal with whatever crisis comes after that. One step at a time. Victoria nodded. Okay. One step at a time. She left and Eli locked up the garage and drove home to his tiny apartment above a Chinese restaurant. He showered, ate leftover fried rice and tried to sleep. At 2 a.m, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Morrison? A man's voice, unfamiliar. Yes. My name is Robert Chun, no relation to Dr. Chun. I'm a reporter for the Washington Post. I'm working on a story about what's happening in Riverside, and I'd like to interview you. It's 2 in the morning. I know. I apologize. But my editor wants this story for tomorrow's edition, and I wanted to give you a chance to tell your side before I publish. Eli sat up. What story? The story about how a mechanic with no medical training is treating disabled children in his garage. The story about how desperate parents are flocking to Ohio chasing a miracle that medical professionals say is impossible. The story about whether you're a hero or a dangerous fraud. Eli's blood went cold. I'm not treating anyone. I'm assessing them and referring them to actual medical professionals. But you're the one they're coming to see. You're the one giving them hope. I'm the one listening to them. And some people say that's irresponsible. That you're practicing medicine without a license. That you're exploiting vulnerable families. Would you like to respond to those allegations? Who's saying that? Several physicians who've reviewed what you're doing. The Ohio Medical Board is considering an investigation. And there are families who came to your garage today, who say you gave them false hope and sent them away devastated. I was honest with them. Honest or crushing. One mother told me you looked at her daughter for 5 minutes and declared her hopeless. I didn't say hopeless. I said I didn't see voluntary movement. What's the difference to a mother? Robertson asked. Eli closed his eyes. Are you going to publish this no matter what I say? I'm going to publish a story. Whether it's fair to you depends on whether you talk to me. Then here's your quote, Eli said. I'm not a doctor. I never claimed to be. I'm just someone who learned that sometimes the experts are wrong. Sometimes a body can do things that tests say it can't. And sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is believe them when they tell you what they're experiencing. If that makes me irresponsible, fine. But at least I'm listening. And the families you turned away? I told them the truth. That's the only thing I can give anyone. Even if the truth destroys them. The truth doesn't destroy people, Eli said. False hope does. I'd rather be honest and hated than dishonest and loved. Robertson was quiet for a moment. That's a good quote. Thank you for your time, Mr. Morrison. He hung up. Eli sat in his dark apartment and waited for the sun to come up, knowing that when it did, everything would be different again. The Washington Post story ran at 6 o'clock the next morning with the headline, Miracle Mechanic or Dangerous Fraud? The Controversial Treatment Dividing Medical Professionals. The article was balanced but devastating. It quoted doctors saying Eli was dangerous. It quoted families saying he'd given them hope. It quoted Victoria defending him. It quoted Marcus calling the whole thing a tragedy waiting to happen. And it included a statement from the Ohio Medical Board, saying they were opening an investigation into whether Eli was practicing medicine without a license. By 8 o'clock, there were 2 news vans outside Eli's garage. By 9, there were 5. By 10, the police had shut down the street because the crowd had grown so large that it was a safety hazard. Eli didn't open the garage. He sat inside in the dark and watched through the window as protesters arrived, people holding signs that said, "Let parents choose" and "Medical freedom" on one side, and people holding signs that said, "Protect disabled children" and "Stop medical fraud" on the other. His phone rang constantly. News organizations, lawyers offering to represent him, medical boards demanding interviews, families begging for appointments. And one call at 11 o'clock that changed everything. Mr. Morrison? A woman's voice, professional and cold. This is Dana Silverman from the Ohio Medical Board. As you may be aware, we've opened an investigation into your activities. I'm calling to inform you that until this investigation is complete, you are ordered to cease all activities that could be construed as medical treatment, assessment, or consultation. If you violate this order, you will face criminal charges. Do you understand? I understand, Eli said. Good. Someone will contact you to schedule an interview. In the meantime, do not see any patients, do not offer medical advice, and do not continue any treatments you've started. Any violation will be considered obstruction of our investigation. She hung up. Eli sat there holding his phone, and he understood that he'd just been shut down. Everything he'd started, everything he'd promised to the 6 families whose kids showed movement, was over. His phone rang again immediately. Victoria. I heard, she said. I'm getting my lawyers involved. This is overreach. You're not practicing medicine. Victoria, stop. What? Stop. Let it go. They're right. I'm not qualified for this. I was stupid to think I could help. I should have stuck to cars. Eli, Sky was luck. That's all. She was going to recover anyway, and I just happened to be there. But I'm not a miracle worker. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a mechanic who got in over his head. And now I'm going to lose my garage and probably face criminal charges, and for what? So I could play hero for 2 weeks. You don't believe that. I don't know what I believe anymore, Eli said, and he hung up. He sat in the dark garage surrounded by the tools he understood. Wrenches and ratchets and diagnostic equipment that gave clear answers to clear questions. He thought about Sarah, about how he'd failed to save her. He thought about Sky, about how he'd probably just made her life harder by putting her in the spotlight. He thought about the 6 kids he'd promised to help and would now have to abandon. And he thought about how much easier it would have been if Victoria's SUV had never pulled into his garage on that Tuesday morning 2 weeks ago. At 2 o'clock, someone knocked on the garage door. Eli ignored it. They knocked again, harder. Mr. Morrison? A child's voice. It's Michael Collins. From yesterday. Can I talk to you? Eli stood up and opened the door a crack. Michael sat in his wheelchair with his mother standing behind him, both of them looking determined. The news said you can't see patients anymore, Michael said. That's right. Because they think you're practicing medicine. Yes. But you're not. You're just listening. That's not medicine. That's just being nice. Eli felt something twist in his chest. The medical board doesn't see it that way. Then they're stupid, Michael said bluntly. His mother didn't correct him. Look, I know you're in trouble. And I know it's because of people like me, people who came here asking for help. But yesterday after I saw you, I went home and practiced moving my finger. And this morning, Michael held up his hand and deliberately moved his index finger, then his middle finger. Both of them. Clear voluntary movement. I did that. Me. Because you told me it was real. Because you believed me. And if you give up now because some stupid board is scared of things they don't understand, then you're telling me I was wrong to hope. You're telling me that the rules matter more than the truth. Eli stared at this 8-year-old boy, who just made the most articulate argument for civil disobedience he'd ever heard. Michael, I'm not asking you to treat me. I'm not asking you to be my doctor. I'm just asking you not to tell me I'm wrong about my own body. That's all. Just don't tell me I'm imagining this. Michael moved his fingers again, and this time his thumb twitched too. Jennifer Collins was crying. We're not here to get you in trouble, she said. We're here to say thank you. Because of you, we found a physical therapist who believes Michael can improve. Because of you, we got a second opinion from a neurologist who saw what you saw. Because of you, we have hope. Real medical documented hope. So whatever the medical board says, whatever the news reports, you changed our lives. And we wanted you to know that. She put an envelope in Eli's hand. This is a letter. From all 6 families whose kids you identified yesterday. We all wrote it together. When you're ready, read it. They left before Eli could respond. He stood in the doorway of his garage, holding the envelope, watching Michael and his mother disappear into the crowd. He went back inside, locked the door, and opened the envelope. The letter was handwritten, multiple pages, different handwriting on each page. Dear Mr. Morrison, you told me my daughter wasn't imagining her foot movement. Her neurologist scheduled an EMG test. It showed nerve activity. They don't understand why, but it's real. Thank you. Patricia Nguyen. My son hasn't smiled in 2 years. Yesterday after seeing you he smiled. Not because you promised him anything. Because someone finally believed him. That's worth everything. Robert and Sandra Martinez. I've spent $47,000 on treatments that didn't work because I was desperate. You spent an hour with my daughter and told me the truth, that you didn't know. That honesty saved me from spending another $47,000 on false hope. Thank you for that gift. Melissa Turner, page after page. 6 families. 6 children. 6 stories of how 1 hour of attention had changed their trajectory. Eli read the whole letter twice, and by the time he finished he was crying. His phone rang. Dr. Chun. Have you heard? Dr. Chun asked. Heard what? Dr. Sarah Kim and Dr. Rodriguez submitted a formal letter to the Ohio Medical Board. They stated that you were operating under medical supervision, that your assessments were preliminary screenings only, and that all actual medical decisions were made by licensed physicians. They took responsibility for the medical aspects and stated you were functioning as a non-medical interviewer gathering patient histories. Eli sat up. They did what? They protected you. Legally, you're now classified as support staff operating under physician supervision. The medical board can't charge you with practicing medicine if licensed doctors are taking responsibility for the medical decisions. Why would they do that? Because they saw what you saw, Dr. Chun said. Because in one day you identified 6 children who'd been medically dismissed, and you were right about all of them. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because you're paying attention in ways that medical training sometimes teaches us not to. He paused. Also, Victoria Hart made a very generous donation to both of their research departments. I'm not saying she bought their support, but she definitely made supporting you very appealing. Eli laughed, a sound somewhere between relief and disbelief. So what happens now? Now you keep doing what you're doing, but with medical supervision, with documentation, by the book. No more garage consultations. We're setting up a proper assessment center. Victoria's funding it. We've got space in a medical office building, proper equipment, a full team of specialists. You'll do your interviews, we'll do the medical assessments, and together we'll help kids who've been overlooked. I'm a mechanic, Eli said. You're also someone who saved my career, Dr. Chun said quietly. I've been seeing patterns on scans for 20 years that I couldn't explain. I've been noting anomalies that my colleagues dismiss as artifacts. But I never had the courage to say the scans might be showing something real that our tests can't measure. You gave me that courage. You proved that sometimes the patient knows more than the test results. He paused. So yeah, you're a mechanic. But you're also the most important diagnostic tool I've ever worked with. You ask questions no one else thinks to ask. You notice things everyone else has trained themselves to ignore. That's not nothing. That's everything. After they hung up, Eli sat in his garage for a long time, thinking about how his life had gone from fixing cars to fixing medical assessments in 2 weeks. Thinking about how Sarah's death had led him to Sky, and Sky had led him to Michael, and Michael had led him to this moment where he was apparently becoming part of a medical team despite having no medical training. It was insane. It was impossible. It was happening anyway. 3 days later, the Hart Medical Assessment Center opened in a professional building in downtown Riverside. It had a proper waiting room, examination rooms, diagnostic equipment, and a full-time staff: 3 doctors, 2 physical therapists, 2 nurses, and Eli, whose official title was Patient Interviewer and Assessment Coordinator. His job was to spend an hour with each child, asking questions, building rapport, and identifying subtle signs of neurological function that standard tests missed. The doctors would then do comprehensive medical evaluations. The team would meet to discuss each case. Recommendations would be made. Families would be given honest assessments and realistic treatment plans. No promises. No miracles. Just thorough, attentive, patient-centered care. The waiting list was 3 months long. Within a week, families came from all over Ohio, then from neighboring states, then from across the country. They came with medical files and desperate hope, and the team did their best to help. Most of the children they saw didn't show the signs Eli looked for. Most of them had permanent injuries with no potential for recovery beyond what they'd already achieved. For those families, the team provided honest assessments, connected them with support services, and helped them move forward with acceptance and adaptation. But some children, maybe 1 in 20, showed the tiny, dismissed, impossible signs of neurological function that everyone else had stopped looking for. Those children got intensive therapy plans. Some improved. Some didn't. But all of them got to be seen, really seen, for the first time since their injuries. Sky came to the center twice a week for physical therapy. By week 3, she could walk 15 feet without support. By week 6, she could walk across the entire therapy room. By week 10, she walked out of her wheelchair and never got back in. The medical team documented everything. They wrote papers. They presented at conferences. They proposed new assessment protocols for incomplete spinal cord injuries. They faced skepticism, criticism, and professional attacks. But they kept going because they were seeing results that couldn't be denied. And through it all, Eli kept doing what he'd always done, listening to children that everyone else had stopped hearing. 3 months after the center opened, Victoria asked Eli to come to her house for dinner. It was the first social invitation she'd extended, and Eli was nervous as he drove through the gates of her estate, past the manicured lawns and the fountain, to the sprawling house that probably cost more than everything Eli would earn in his entire life. Sky met him at the door. She was standing, walking, moving with the slight awkwardness of someone still rebuilding strength and coordination, but moving under her own power. "Hi, Eli," she said, and she threw her arms around him in a hug that nearly knocked him over. Eli hugged her back, and he felt Sarah's ghost ease slightly, like maybe some of the guilt he'd carried for 7 years was finally allowed to rest. Dinner was surprisingly normal: grilled chicken, salad, potatoes. Victoria had cooked it herself, and it was slightly overcooked because she'd been distracted by work calls, and Sky teased her about it in the way kids tease their mothers. They ate at the kitchen table, not the formal dining room, and they talked about school and physical therapy and the funny thing that happened in the waiting room yesterday. Felt like family. Eli hadn't felt like part of a family in 7 years. After dinner, Sky went upstairs to do homework, and Victoria led Eli out to the back patio. They sat in comfortable chairs overlooking the pool, and Victoria poured 2 glasses of wine. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said. "I've been keeping a secret and it's eating me alive, and I need you to know the truth before we go any further with this." She gestured vaguely at the space between them. "Whatever this is." Eli's stomach tightened. "Okay." Victoria took a long drink of wine. "The accident. 3 years ago. The drunk driver that hit us." She stopped. Started again. "It wasn't random. The driver was targeted. Someone paid him to hit our car." The words landed like a bomb. Eli stared at her. "What?" "I've been investigating it privately for 6 months. The drunk driver died in the crash. His injuries were much worse than ours. But before he died, he was in the hospital for 3 days and he said things. Confused things, probably drug-induced, but the nurse wrote them down. He said someone paid him $50,000 to hit a black SUV on a specific route at a specific time. He said he was supposed to make it look like an accident." Victoria's hands were shaking. "I hired investigators. They found bank records. Wire transfers. Untraceable, routed through offshore accounts. Someone wanted to kill me, Eli. And they almost did. But they hit the passenger side instead of the driver's side. They hit Sky." "Who?" Eli asked. "I don't know. The investigation is still ongoing. But the transfers originated from an account that was used to pay other contractors. Security experts. Hackers. People who do illegal work for corporations. Someone with resources wanted me dead. And when I think about who had motive..." She stopped. "Marcus Webb was on the board of a rival tech company before I hired him away. He's been positioning himself to take over Heart Technologies for years. He tried to have me declared mentally unfit when I started bringing Sky to your garage. He filed the complaint with Child Services. He talked to the press. You think Marcus tried to kill you?" Victoria's eyes were wet. "I think someone tried. I think they targeted my daughter instead. And I think the guilt of that, the knowledge that Sky is disabled because someone wanted me dead, is why I became obsessed with fixing her. Not just because she's my daughter. Because her injury is my fault in ways that go beyond being distracted while driving." She looked at Eli. "And I think you need to know that because if someone wanted me dead 3 years ago, they might still want me dead now. And if you're close to me, if you're associated with me, you might be in danger too." Eli sat with this information trying to process it. "Have you told the police?" "I've told my private security team. I've told my lawyers. The police can't do much without more evidence. But we're being careful. Very careful. Sky has a security detail at school now. I have bodyguards. Our cars are swept for tracking devices weekly." She paused. "I should have told you sooner. Before you got involved. Before I dragged you into my mess. Why are you telling me now?" "Because Sky loves you," Victoria said simply. "Because you've become important to us. And because..." She stopped, struggling with words. "Because I'm falling for you. And I needed you to know what you'd be getting into if you fell back." The admission hung in the air between them. Eli thought about danger and complications and the fact that his life had already been destroyed once, and maybe he didn't have the strength to survive it again. He thought about how easy it would be to walk away. Then he thought about Sky hugging him at the door, about Victoria's careful strength, about the family feeling he'd had at dinner. "I'm already in it," Eli said. "Whatever it is, I'm already in it." Victoria closed her eyes in relief. "You're crazy." "Probably. Someone might actually try to kill you. Someone already tried to destroy my reputation and my livelihood. At this point, what's one more threat?" Victoria laughed, and it turned into crying, and Eli moved his chair closer and held her hand while she fell apart and pulled herself back together. "I don't deserve you," she said. "You kind of do," Eli said. "You took a chance on a random mechanic because you believed your daughter. You fought your board of directors, fired your COO, funded a medical center, and changed the lives of dozens of families. You're terrifying in the best possible way." "I'm terrified," Victoria corrected. "That too." They sat in the dark, holding hands, and Eli understood that this was the moment where he chose whether to run or stay. He'd been running for 7 years, from grief, from connection, from the possibility of caring about someone again. Maybe it was time to stop. Inside the house, Sky was practicing walking up and down the stairs, her footsteps audible through the open door. Each step was deliberate, careful, but real. Proof that impossible things happened. Proof that sometimes broken things healed in ways nobody expected. "So what do we do about Marcus?" Eli asked. "We wait," Victoria said. "We gather evidence. We let the investigators work. And we make sure Sky is safe. And us. We take it slow. We figure this out. Victoria stopped as her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face went white. "What?" Eli asked. "It's from the investigator." Victoria opened the message and read it, and her hand started shaking. They found something. The account that paid for the accident. It was funded by Heart Technologies' corporate accounts. "Someone inside my company tried to kill me." She looked up at Eli, and her expression was devastated. It was Marcus. It had to be Marcus. He's been planning this for years. The hiring, the positioning, the attempted murder. Everything. "Call the police," Eli said. "I am," Victoria said, already dialing. "But he's going to run. The minute he finds out we know, he's going to disappear." Except Marcus didn't run. The next morning he walked into Heart Technologies headquarters like nothing was wrong, attended his meetings, and acted completely normal. Because he didn't know Victoria knew. By noon, the police had arrested him in his office. By evening, it was all over the news. Heart Technologies COO arrested in murder-for-hire plot. The details came out slowly. Marcus had been embezzling from Heart Technologies for 3 years. Victoria had been about to discover it during a routine audit. Marcus had panicked and hired someone to kill her in a way that looked accidental. When the accident didn't kill Victoria but disabled Sky instead, Marcus had tried to use Sky's condition to have Victoria declared mentally unfit, planning to take over the company and bury the embezzlement evidence. Every move he'd made, the bribe to Eli, the child services complaint, the press leaks, had been about discrediting Victoria and isolating her from anyone who might support her. It had almost worked. The trial took 6 months. Marcus claimed innocence, but the financial records were damning. Wire transfers, email trails, testimony from the contractor who'd recruited the drunk driver. By the time the verdict came in, guilty on all counts, 25 years minimum sentence, Victoria had already moved on. She'd restructured Heart Technologies, promoted people she trusted, and created a new division focused on medical technology and accessibility. She'd also created the Heart Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to funding research on neurological recovery and providing resources for families with disabled children. The assessment center became part of the foundation, expanding to 3 locations across Ohio. Eli kept working with the medical team, interviewing children, identifying the ones who'd been overlooked. He trained other interviewers to do what he did, to ask the right questions, to really listen, to notice the tiny signs that standard assessments missed. Some people called him the miracle mechanic. He hated the name, but it stuck. He wasn't performing miracles. He was just paying attention. But in a world where most disabled children were told what they couldn't do instead of being asked what they could do, attention looked like magic. 1 year after Victoria's SUV had first pulled into his garage, Eli stood in the assessment center's lobby and watched Sky walk through the door without any assistance. She moved with confidence now, barely a trace of the awkwardness from months ago. "Hi, Eli," she said, hugging him. "Ready for physical therapy?" "Actually, no," Sky said, grinning. "Dr. Reeves says I'm discharged. I don't need therapy anymore. I'm officially done." Eli felt something in his chest crack open. Done. Done. Graduated. Released. Whatever you want to call it. I can walk, run, jump, dance, everything. I'm normal again. Well, as normal as I ever was. She laughed. Victoria came in behind her, and her face was radiant. "We wanted to tell you in person," Victoria said. "The doctors ran every test. She has full neurological function below the injury site. Complete recovery. They're calling her a medical miracle, but you and I know the truth." "What's the truth?" Eli asked. "She was never as broken as everyone said she was," Victoria said quietly. "She just needed someone to believe her long enough for her body to prove everyone wrong." They took Eli to dinner to celebrate. A real restaurant this time, not home-cooked. Sky ordered the biggest dessert on the menu and talked about trying out for the track team at school. Victoria held Eli's hand under the table and smiled more than he'd ever seen her smile. Felt like an ending. But it wasn't. 2 days later, a woman came to the assessment center with her teenage son. The boy had been in a coma for 6 months after a drowning accident. He'd woken up 3 weeks ago, but the doctors said he had significant brain damage, permanent cognitive impairment. He'd need full-time care for the rest of his life. But the mother had noticed something. Sometimes when she talked to him, his eyes followed her. Sometimes when she asked him questions, his finger would twitch, once for yes, twice for no. She'd mentioned it to his doctors, and they'd said it was random movement. Reflexes. Not communication. "But it's not random," she said to Eli, tears streaming down her face. "He's in there. He's trying to talk to me. And nobody believes me." Eli looked at this mother, at her desperate hope, at the boy sitting quietly in his wheelchair with eyes that did seem to be tracking movement. He thought about Sky. About Michael. About all the children who'd been dismissed and underestimated. "Tell me everything," Eli said. "Start from the beginning, and don't leave anything out." And he listened. Because that's what he did. Because someone had to. Because sometimes the most important thing you could do was believe someone when they told you they saw something impossible. 6 months later, the boy was communicating through an eye gaze computer system. He had significant deficits, but he wasn't cognitively impaired. He was trapped in a body that didn't respond the way he wanted, and it had taken someone paying attention to figure out he was still there, still fighting, still trying to be heard. The medical team wrote another paper. They gave more presentations. They faced more skepticism, but they kept working because results spoke louder than criticism. And through it all, Eli and Victoria built something that looked like love. It wasn't easy. Victoria's schedule was insane. Eli's work was emotionally exhausting. They fought about money. Victoria wanted to give him everything, and Eli wanted to earn his own way. They fought about security. Victoria's bodyguards made Eli feel like he was being watched every second. They fought about the future. What it meant to build a life together when both of their lives were so complicated. But they also laughed together. They cooked dinner together. They watched Sky grow stronger and more confident. They celebrated every child who recovered function that doctors said was impossible. They mourned every child who didn't. And slowly, carefully, they became family. 2 years after that first Tuesday morning, Eli sold his garage. He didn't need it anymore. The assessment center was his job now, and he made enough to live on, and Victoria had long since stopped offering to pay for everything. The garage sold to a young mechanic who just moved to Riverside. Someone who needed the same second chance Eli had needed 7 years ago. On the last day before the sale closed, Eli stood in the empty garage and thought about everything that had happened there. Sarah's medical bills had bankrupted him, and he'd bought this garage with the last of his savings. He'd hidden here for 7 years, fixing engines because engines made sense when nothing else did. And then Victoria and Sky had pulled up in their expensive SUV, and everything had changed. He thought about the man he'd been 2 years ago. Broken, isolated, drowning in grief. He thought about the man he was now, part of a medical team, part of a family, part of something bigger than himself. The garage didn't feel sad anymore. It felt like a cocoon he'd needed until he was ready to emerge. His phone rang. Victoria. Where are you? At the garage. Saying goodbye. Well, stop saying goodbye and get to the center. We have 17 families scheduled today, and Dr. Chun is running late, and Sky just showed up demanding to volunteer, and everything is chaos. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Make it 5. I love you. I love you too. Eli hung up, took one last look at the garage where everything had started, and walked out into the sunlight. The assessment center was 15 minutes away, but he told Victoria 5 because he knew she needed him and he didn't want to make her wait. As he drove, he passed the spot where Victoria's SUV had been hit 3 years ago. Someone had put up a small memorial, flowers and a sign that said, "Miracles happen here." It was cheesy and overly sentimental, and it made Eli smile anyway, because miracles didn't happen there. That intersection was just where someone's plan to murder a brilliant woman had gone wrong. The real miracle had happened in a garage, when a mother decided to trust her instincts and a mechanic decided to believe a child. The real miracle was happening every day at the assessment center, where children who'd been dismissed were being seen and heard and given real, honest chances to improve. The real miracle was that broken things sometimes healed, and broken people sometimes found each other, and love sometimes grew in the spaces between loss and hope. Eli pulled into the assessment center parking lot. Through the window, he could see Dr. Chan arguing with Dr. Rodriguez about something, probably a diagnostic disagreement they'd resolve in 10 minutes through compromise and mutual respect. He could see Dr. Reeves working with a child on parallel bars, patient and encouraging. He could see Sky at the reception desk, charming a nervous family with the kind of easy confidence that came from having survived your own impossible journey. And he could see Victoria in her office on the phone, probably fighting with someone about funding or regulations or whatever battle needed fighting that day. She saw him through the window and smiled, and even from across the parking lot, that smile felt like coming home. Eli got out of his car and walked toward the building, toward the chaos and the challenges and the families who needed help, toward the woman he loved and the daughter who'd saved his life by letting him help save hers, toward the work that made sense of everything that had come before. This wasn't the life he'd planned. It wasn't the life he'd imagined, but it was the life he'd built from the broken pieces of everything he'd lost. And for the first time in 7 years, that felt like enough. Inside, a mother was crying because her son had just moved his foot for the first time in 18 months. A father was arguing with insurance about covering experimental therapy. A child was laughing despite being told she'd never have anything to laugh about again. And Eli walked in ready to listen because that's what he did. Because someone had to. Because impossible things happen every day. And sometimes all they needed was someone willing to notice.